Hello everybody and welcome to my studio. On this video we're going to be painting this hand towel that I have made. These are handmade hand towels that you can buy on my website. I have a limited amount because I generally buy the whole entire bolt, so whatever it makes is what I've got. This is a linen fabric here. I loved painting on it, but I use a different paint on this than fabric paints. I'm going to use fluid acrylic paints, DecoArt Media Fluid Acrylic Paints. These are the colors I use: Cobalt Teal Hue, Primary Cyan, Titanium White, Carbon Black, Viridian, and Green Gold. Okay, you can use fabric paints if you have them. Pick out some colors that you like. You do not have to use the same colors I use. You need a medium and dark value color of whatever color you're going to paint them, and a light and dark or medium dark. This would probably be close to an olive green, and this would be a Hauser dark green. So if you're using regular Americana paint, you want to have a fabric medium to put in there. Now, I only used 4 brushes for this entire project. I used a 10 chisel brush, a 6 chisel brush. That means the bristles are shorter on a chisel brush. This is a 4 flat. You can see how much longer the bristles are on a flat brush. And then I used a 10-0 liner brush. That's for the detailed little dots and the lines in the leaves. So just a few brushes and a few colors is all it's going to take to paint this design in, and I can't wait to get started, so let's do it. Okay, so we have got this ready to go. So let me tell you how I got right here. I have traced my line drawing onto tracing paper and transferred it on with some gray graphite paper. Now, you don't have to push very hard with this fabric. It's a linen type fabric, and it will transfer. The pattern will transfer very, very easily onto this design for you to paint it. I have it taped. My fabric is taped to a piece of cardboard that has Glad press and seal on it, so my fabric won't stick to the cardboard as the paint goes through it, because it will go through it. And then I rolled up the rest of the towel, clipped it to the cardboard so that it won't get in my way as I'm painting, and then taped it down right there, just in case it decides to come loose. This is just taped on with Scotch tape, and I'm going to leave my pattern on here, taped on here. I'm just going to flip it up in case I need to lay it back on it and add any of the details on here, or if I am confused about a line somewhere. So on my palette here, I am going to put some paint out, and I'm using the fluid acrylic paints, DecoArt Fluid Acrylics, Cobalt Teal Hue. My favorite color in the line is this color. And you just need a little bit. That's probably enough to do 3. And I want an accent blue color on here. So I think I'm going to go with Primary Cyan. These 2 colors, I think they'll be just fine for our project. I'm going to spritz my palette with some water because I want this to be like a watercolor effect on this project. So I want plenty of water there. Make sure that you do not have any paint on your hands if you touch your fabric, because once you get it on there somewhere else, it's not going to come out. I have done that, and it was sad. So I'm going to use a small chisel brush. So let me see if I can find it. You can use a small flat as well, like this is a 6 flat. I like the chisel ones because the bristles are shorter, but I might have to switch over to a flat one if this one doesn't work, just because the flat one will hold a lot more water. So now we want a little bit of water in our brush as we do this because we want it to have like a watercolor effect. But because this is like a linen fabric, you have to be careful because it can bleed way out into the fabric, and we don't want that to happen. We want to keep it a little controlled but still make it look like watercolor. So I'm going to pick up on the corner of my chisel brush here. I've got plenty of water, but I can always come back. I can always come over here and grab a drop of water. And I'm just going to start painting this in. So I can already tell I want more water, so I'm going to pick up a little drop of water. And I'm just going to let that water soak into that paint and pull that paint down. It will be a little bit faded as it dries. So it will should be darker up here and fade away as it dries. You can use an angle brush to do this as well, but you know, and you would have to use a smaller size angle brush so that it doesn't get in your other areas that you're painting. So I'm just going to continue this on all my petals and grab water as I need it. I want this to be very watercolory. Occasionally you can grab some of that other blue. It's a little bit brighter, and add some of that in there. And I'm just going to move around the design and not stay right next to each other. And sometimes I will just pick up some water and use some water in here because I want this to stay really light. So just move around and paint in all of your areas. With this same loading of the brush, plenty of water. You're thinning the paint down with some water before you apply it. If it comes like that's really thick, so I'm just going to wipe my brush out and get water only, and then put, oh see, I put too much water in there and it's bleeding out, so we have to be careful about that. You can also mix these two colors and get a real pretty color. If my paint feels like it's getting too far over on my brush, I'm just going to go rinse my brush out, which is what I just did. I felt like it was too far. These little brushes can get filled up pretty quickly. So you see why we don't want our lines to be too dark, because they're going to stay in the design. And so we don't want to have to worry about getting our paint so dark that we have to cover up those lines. And if you are using a much thicker fabric than what I'm using here, you can use a lot more water. I did this on a pillow cover, and I used more water in my brush because the fabric was much a tighter woven fabric, and so I could use a lot more water in my brush and it wouldn't bleed out as far. So I'm going to move over here and do a little bit. Grab a little bit of that cyan blue, or primary blue I believe it is. You could use cyan blue. I don't know if I got that one. Cerulean blue I got out. That would be a pretty color to go along with it. But I like the primary blue because it's a little bit of a brighter blue. So you get a couple of values going on here. with your petals. And occasionally I will just mix the paint. And that one bled out quite a bit too, but I still have some petals to paint beside it, so it'll be alright, and the leaves will cover up some of that. So again, with a smaller brush, it's going to take a little bit more time to do this. A little bit darker out here. I really want the tips to be the darkest part, and let it kind of fade away into those other colors. And don't worry about if you can't tell what's a petal and what's not. Just paint in all of your areas. When we come back and add our dots in here for our centers, that's where we can decide, oh, okay, that's the center of a petal. Because right now we don't have to worry about deciding that. We just want to get our colors in here. So I don't want you to worry so much about, is that a complete flower? Where does that petal go to? Just paint them all in and don't worry about what they go to. There will be some open areas around it, so don't feel like you have to fill in every single spot in here. Grab a little water. And you can just do any kind. I think a hand towel with I can't think of the flower now. I'll think of it. I'll think of it here in a minute. I want to say impatience, but that's not the flower I'm thinking of. Although impatience would be really pretty. Now when we get out to the leaves, we especially want to make sure that we control our water out there a little bit more. We want varied values here. We're only using these two colors. We're not using any other colors in our flowers. So how we get our values is by how thick some areas are, how light some areas are. You know, and just the if you mix the color, you'll get a different color. And then as it dries, you know, the more areas that have water, the more it's going to fade back in there. I think this paint just does beautifully on fabric. And then when it's dry, I usually give my fabric a good 24 hours to dry. Most projects I paint, I give about 24 hours to dry. And then I will heat set it with an iron. I'll just take another piece of this linen fabric and lay over it a scrap piece and iron it on a hot iron for linen. And you can heat set it in the dryer as well. I rarely wash my decorative hand towels unless somebody actually uses them, but this would be a really lovely gift to give somebody, like if you send over a basket of food or something, and then you could lay this across the top to cover the food in the basket. I think that would be so pretty. Oh, I got a lot of water there, so that might bleed out. I'll have to be careful. I'm just going to use a little bit of tinted water right here. I want to keep that light. This goes pretty quickly because it's not a very big design. You just have to be patient with yourself. A little bit of paint. If it's not moving, I generally wipe the tip of my brush to get the paint off and pick up just a little bit of water. I can get a little bit more mix of color here. And then I want a little bit of water to bleed that out down into the center of the flower. We don't want it to bleed out everywhere else. And there's some petals kind of back in here, so I'm going to paint a little bit back in there. I want to leave some of it open. Oop, too much water there. Now, as this dries, and you can see how dark the values are on it, you can then go in and darken and adjust any place that you feel needs it. So I'm constantly picking up water, picking up paint, wiping off any excess that's on my brush because I don't want tons of paint laying down everywhere. Okay, this is a flower out here, so let me get it. Some paint on it. Keep it a little bit darker at the tips out here. I'm going to wipe off and grab some of the other blue and blend them right here. Okay, now I'm going to wipe off and get a drop of water because I want to pull this paint. Another drop of water. I want it to fade away down in here. Okay, I'm looking for any missed petals. I see one out here. A couple here. Okay, I'm going to let the flower dry just a little bit and then come back. This one I definitely want to add some more color onto it. I'm going to go ahead with this color and work on my ribbon now. Now this is where you can go down to a smaller brush and let's see, I had a brush picked out for this and I don't know where I put it. But you want to have a small flat brush of some kind. So I'm going to go with a 4 flat. I'm going to get it wet. Now this is where you have to be a little bit more careful with how much water is in your paint, because if it bleeds out, you can't fix it. So we're going to paint our ribbon in with this same color, maybe go with a little bit of the darker color. You can paint your ribbon really any color that you want. If you want to bring another color into this, you certainly can. So I've thinned down some of that, ooh, a little bit too much water. This is linen, so this linen fabric is going to just soak up that paint and spread it out. So I've just kind of made a wash of the paint here. And I'm just using the water. Just going up to my line barely, making sure that I put the majority of the water in the center of the ribbon and then work it out from there. See, I've got a lot of bleed right there. But we can come in and take care of all these ends, all these rough edges at the end when we do some outlining. I'm going to outline everything with a pen. Start in the middle and just work your way out a little bit. That side over there is definitely darker. Be very careful here. Add a little bit more of that other blue in there to darken this up. Okay, so I want a little bit of this darker blue where we have a fold here. I'm going to rinse my brush out and get a little bit of the turquoise and blend that out. Small amounts of water and paint. Over here I just had way too much water in my brush. So let's keep it small amounts, and if you want to create highlights, you'll just leave a space open where you won't put any or hardly any paint. So I want to create a highlight here on my ribbon. We can come back and do that with white paint as well. And I really want my highlight to go all the way across. On that one I didn't accomplish that. So now I can go and fill in my ribbon. Just a little bit at a time. Always put your paintbrush down in the middle of your ribbon so that if you have a lot of water, it won't bleed out past your line that you drew. Be careful if you've already got a lot of water in there, because then the water won't really have too many places to go. So again, here I want to add a little bit darker color. And I'm going to wipe my brush off and get just a little bit of that lighter color with a little water. Now the wash that we made here. And this is really tiny amounts of paint. And I'm just barely going to go over this because I don't want it to be super bright white. Just want to create the illusion of a highlight on there. Alright, start in the middle. Back and forth. And just working that water. Mix some more here. If you feel like you've got a lot of water in your brush, then touch your paper towel. Let it wick some of that out. I'm going to put a little bit of a highlight back here on this end. Okay, we're going back over here now, and I'm darkening up the tips of some of my turquoise ones just with a float of color. You don't have to do them all, just a few. Just this is just a side load float here. It's a little bit harder to do on fabric because the fabric gives and the brush is a little bit softer, so it does give a little bit, but it can be done. So now I'm going to go into my blue and do some of the tips that were blue. And darken them up. You have a little bit more variance of color in here, and you don't have to do them all, just pick some that you feel like would make the design look a little bit more appealing. It's just a little cluster of hydrangeas. We don't have to be super carried away with this. Okay, I think I'll let those dry a little bit. I did, I think I might get my white out just so I can highlight on my ribbon a little bit. So I've got my titanium white out. And I could get fabric paint as well if I wanted to. I'm going to see if I can brighten a little highlight on here. I just have a little bit on the toe of my brush, just kind of sawing it back and forth. I'm going to put a little bit along the edges here where the ribbon is on top here. A little bit of a highlight, and over here I didn't put my highlight in. I forgot to leave it, the fabric light, so I'm going to put a highlight in here with my white. It's very easy to do if it gets too dark, you know, or you forgot. Yeah, I'm gonna put a little bit out here on the tip of this one, I think. Where you can have a little bit of fun adding some of those little bright, oops, I was doing this one out here. So I think that looks pretty good. Now you can add a little bit of this into your centers. If you feel like your centers got too dark, you can come in here and lighten up some of your centers. I think mine are okay. I'm not really too awful worried about them. But you can tap some white in here if you feel like your blue got just way too dark. So that's an option right there for you to do. So we have more ribbon to do. We have 3 loops on here. So I'm going to go back to my other brush because I want to finish up my ribbon. And again, I'm going to create a wash of the 2 colors. Ooh, that one's really bright. I'll make more of this one because I'll probably need a little bit more of this one. Okay, so I'm going to start on my ribbon. I'm just going to go ahead and paint the whole thing, and I'll just come back in and add my white highlight. But if you don't want to have to do that, then you just want to leave a gap, a little bit of a gap in between your colors so that you'll have the beginnings of your highlight. I'm going to pick up some darker blue for over here. And that was a little bit too thin. I'm going to add some more color to that. I want a little bit of dark here. I want dark here where it goes underneath the flowers. Just pull a little bit of that out, and I'm going to go into my turquoise and start adding that. I'm going to clean my brush a little bit. Pull some of this paint out. And we'll come in and add some highlights on there. That will help that out a lot. Mix up a little bit more of this. Start in the middle. Just a little scrubbing back and forth here. And grab some of that darker blue. I want some right here next to this flower where this kind of goes behind. This is like our shading part of the super easy way to do our shading. Ooh, a little too much water there, so I hope that doesn't bleed out. Okay, I'm going to come over here. I could widen this ribbon a little bit. It's a little bit narrow there at the top. A little bit right here next to this leaf of that darker color. And then I want my lighter color up here. Okay. One more loopy here. And one lighter. Wipe my brush off. Just get a little tiny bit of water. Okay, down here in this other area we want the darker next to the leaf. You're just using small amounts of paint and water. If you get too much, you're going to bleed out everywhere, so I cannot emphasize that enough, that you are very careful. I mean, look how I bled out there. I'm not too happy about that because I really got that. Some bad color, some bad bleeding. Okay, I'm going to wipe my brush because I want that darker color now. A little bit of water mixed in with it. I'm not floating this because I want these two colors to blend well where they meet. And floating is not going to get that look. So I want it darker right here on this inside edge and right here. Let's see, this ribbon goes right to there. Forgot to draw that line in. Clean off my brush. I'm going to go back to my cobalt teal hue and put that in right here and here, and then a little bit of my dark next to this petal right here. So that piece of ribbon is mostly dark, and then as this dries we can come in and darken anything that we need to. I'm going to pull some of this darker color out. And just re-darken any of those that you need to. And I hope you were on camera for all that. I'm going to fold this over, I think, so it's not catching on stuff. This is a very long piece, so it makes it a little bit difficult to keep it on camera, I think. I may move this thing down here, so maybe I can keep this up here and keep it on camera a little bit better. Okay, let's work on our leaves here. So we can go to a little bit larger brush for our leaves. I think I will go to a 10 chisel. And we're going to get out Viridian Green. One of my favorite greens in this line is the Viridian Green. It's got a little bit of a blue tint to it. And some Green Gold. So we want both of those in there, or on our palette. And we're going to take our bigger brush and thin some of this green down. Not crazy super thin. I mean, the paint's already kind of thin, but thin enough that we can put some on here. So I'm going to lay some in here. I have a little bit of water in my paint. Right now I'm working about going around all those petals. So I want to get the excess out. Grab a little bit of the green gold. I want it at the end out here. My tips. A little bit of water. Okay, so now I want to try and blend these two with just a little bit of water. And it's really dark right there, so I'm going to see if I can work that out just a little bit with my brush with some water. Get it a little bit lighter. Okay, let's try that again. I think I'm going to start with my darker green, much thinner color here. Start in the middle and work my way out. Go into some of my lighter color. Put it out on the tips of the brush, and then go into some of my darker color here and get it at the base. Don't get too much water, you don't want to bleed out here. You can come back and darken after this dries, because I know this will be too light, but you just want to have a nice varied color. See, that one right there just got way too dark too soon, so I'm going to skip that one for a minute. Put some darker color in here. Grab some lighter color and put it out at the tips. Let me get enough of that dark color out of my brush. Oop, too much water. See what I did there? Way too much water, so I'm going to have to enlarge my leaf here, which is okay. You want to try not to do that, but you know, things happen when you're painting on fabric, so you just got to go with it and then, you know, figure out how you can adjust and make it work for you. So I'm not going to stress out about that at all. Okay, I'm going to move up to these other ones up here. Some darker color, which is thinned down with some water. It's not the straight dark color here. Wash my brush. I'm going to get my lighter color. Not too much water. I don't want it to bleed out like it did on that other one. If you feel like you've got a lot of water, touch your paper towel before you even come to your fabric. I'm doing a little bit of scrubbing because I'm trying to blend those a little bit. Grab a little bit of that darker color. As long as your paint is kind of wet on the fabric, you can get just a little bit of water and pull that paint out. Some of them darker. I don't want this to bleed into my flowers, but if it does, I'm not going to worry about it because I think on my pillow cover it actually did, and I really liked how that looked. Put a little bit of green into the hydrangea petals. And you can go with just all one green. I mean, if you just like the Viridian green and you just like to put it on and let it fade out, you can do that for sure. So, you know, be a little creative. This is all learning how, especially on this type of fabric, because this is a linen type fabric, is learning how to put it on and control your water as you're doing it. Too much water, not a good thing for this. I'm going to clean my brush off and grab my lighter green and start right here where I left off with my darker green. And I'm going to wipe my brush off and just take some water and pull that green paint right out to the tip. Super easy. If you've got some practice linen or practice fabric, something similar to what you're going to be painting on, if you have some of that, that's always good to try and practice on first. Wiping my brush off, I laid a little bit. Oh no, I didn't get enough water out of my brush, so that leaf is going to become a much bigger leaf. No problem. Wipe my brush off and get some dark. I don't have much water in my brush right now. Just kind of what moisture was on the paper towel when I touched the paper towel. So I'm just using the toe of that brush and kind of scrubbing that in right there. Okay. I'm not going to stress out about that. I don't want you stressing out about it. Unless yours bleeds clear out, way out, that might cause a little bit of an issue. I'm going to go back over here and do this one real quick. Putting some darker paint in around these two leaves. I think this one's on top. Wipe my brush out. Lighter green, and take some of that moisture out of my brush, and I'm going to start putting it in right here. Oh, that was a big drop of water there in my paint. Okay, I'm going to wipe out and just a little tiny drop of water in my brush and pull out. Let the paint just kind of flow out to where it wants to. I want a little bit more darker paint in here. Okay, we've got two more over here. I want this darker next to the petal here. I'm going to wipe my brush out and grab some of that lighter green. And lay it in here. I just have some on the corner of my brush here. Have my brush tilted up a little bit so I can just lay that in. Washed my brush out, and then what water is left in my brush, I dried my brush off. Now I'm just going to pull this color with that little bit of water. And see, it's bleeding out too far as well. So you really have to be careful on linen because the paint will just get away so quickly if you get too much water. It's going to town. Wash my brush out. I'm just going to side load the lighter green and go out here on the edge. I'm going to grab a little dot of water. I want to soften these two colors where they meet if I can. Sometimes it doesn't always work out, but sometimes it does. So there's all of our petals on there. I'm going to come in now with some white paint, go back to my smaller brush, and highlight on these ribbons out here. I want to highlight out here. Along this edge. And right through here, put a highlight. And on this edge. Just our white paint. I'm going to put some on this one, down here. We left a little spot here that we could do. Need a little bit of water or some fresh paint. Probably be best because my paint's starting to dry a little bit. Because I want to put a little bit along this edge right here. And then any places out here on this other ribbon, you'll probably have to go over your white areas a couple of times. To get those areas to pop. Okay, how fun is that looking? All right, let's make a center vein on our leaves. I think we can do that without cotton. Well, let's go ahead and dot the centers of our flowers, and then we'll add a center vein on our leaves. So let me grab a small round or a detail brush, something that can make a very small dot on here. And we're just using black. And you can decide where a center of a flower is, because the way this is painted on here, there's no right or wrong. You make the decisions, okay? If you see the center of a flower in a certain place, then that's the center of a flower. Just go ahead and make it. But keep them delicate and small, and that's going to help a lot. Okay, now let's do our center veins, and we're going to use that dark green. And I need to put some more out. It's Viridian. This would be close to a Hauser dark green, I think, if you're using acrylic paints. I'm going to thin it just a little bit, but not so much that it bleeds. So we can create a center vein. I think now I will move my palette up, because I need this to be down here. Center vein. And then these will have Actually, this one would have been here, but those are kind of connected there. Okay, and then we'll add some veining on the side. And you can go back in and redraw your center vein if you want it to be darker. When it dries, you can go in and shade and separate the leaves a little bit more. These are super thin lines here. Don't let them get too fat. Okay, mine kind of bled out a little bit, so I think instead of outlining with the black, I'm going to just side load that lighter green and shape at the tips. Not going to worry about that one. A little bit of the dark green here. That looks pretty good. And you can add some stripes separating, you know, the bottom of the towel. So I'm going to let this dry completely, and when it gets dry, then I'm going to flip over and do the other side of the fabric. And when I lay my pattern on, when we hang it up, they should be on opposite sides, but you can do just one side if you want. You don't have to do both sides, but my goal is to paint both sides, hopefully, and have a very beautiful decorative hand towel that I can give somebody as a gift, or wrap a food in, cover some food that I'm giving to a neighbor or someone as a gift. And remember to let it dry completely. Heat set it with an iron or in your dryer. I like to use an iron, and just I'd put another piece of linen or some type of fabric, lightweight fabric, over it, and then I iron it, you know, for about 30 seconds or so on a setting that is appropriate for linen. And then I flip it over and I do the back side. I heat set the back side as well. So that should keep your paint in here with no problems. And I think this little project was super fun. I hope you have enjoyed it and that you guys paint it. I cannot wait to see your painted hand towels. And I am making hand towels to sell on my website, but I have just a limited few because I bought all of that they had on the bolt of this, and they haven't gotten any more in yet. So I have just a limited amount of these, so head on over to lonnalamb.com and pick yours up. I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks so much, everybody.